The air inside the grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis buzzed with anticipation, a sea of faces illuminated by the soft glow of chandeliers and the sharp beams of stage lights as hundreds gathered for the Education Reform Summit, a high-profile event aimed at tackling disparities in America's school systems. At the center of the stage stood Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known to most as AOC, her voice ringing with conviction as she addressed the crowd. Her navy blazer hugging her shoulders and her expressive hands punctuating every word, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience. Education is the foundation of opportunity. She declared, her tone fierce yet hopeful, but for too many kids, especially in underserved communities, it's a promise unfulfilled. We're here to change that, to demand equity, to build a system that lifts every child, no matter their zip code. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of energy rippling through the room. Teachers in the front rows clapped fervently, their lanyards swinging, while students in the back held up signs reading, "Fund Our Future." Cameras from MSNBC and local news outlets zoomed in, capturing AOC's intensity, her dark eyes scanning the audience as if inviting each person into her mission. The room felt alive, united in purpose, and for a moment it seemed nothing could derail the momentum. Then, from the press area near the side of the stage, a figure emerged, unscripted and unexpected. Tulsi Gabbard, with her poised demeanor and calm presence, stepped into the aisle, her appearance as startling as a sudden chord in a quiet song. Whispers spread like wildfire, heads turned, and phones were raised, their screens glinting in the dim light. AOC paused mid-sentence, her brow furrowing as she registered the interruption. The crowd's energy shifted, curiosity mingling with confusion. Gabbard, unfazed by the hundreds of eyes now fixed on her, raised a hand in a respectful gesture as if she'd just entered a thoughtful discussion. "Representative?" She began, her voice steady and sincere, carrying a tone of genuine respect that cut through the room's hum. "I couldn't help but overhear your passion for equity, mind, if I add a word or two." Her tone was composed, almost collaborative, but there was a quiet determination in her eye that suggested she knew exactly the value of her contribution. The audience stirred, some chuckling at her boldness, others murmuring in disapproval. A young woman in a red scarf whispered to her friend, who let her in, while a man in a tweed jacket leaned forward, intrigued. AOC's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She gripped the podium, her knuckles whitening for a split second before she regained her composure. "Senator Gabbard, wait." "Actually, former Representative Gabbard," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel. "This is a forum for solutions, not surprises. You're not on the program." Her words drew a smattering of applause, mostly from her supporters clustered near the stage, their faces a mix of admiration and defiance. But Gabbard didn't flinch. She took a small step forward, still in the aisle, her hands now clasped in front of her like someone ready to engage in meaningful dialogue. "I don't mean to ruffle feathers," she said, her smile warm and unwavering, "but when I hear talk of fixing schools, I think folks deserve to hear. All sides, don't you?" The question hung in the air, and the room seemed to hold its breath. A few audience members nodded instinctively, drawn in by her approachable charm, while others shook their heads, sensing a challenge to AOC's authority. The tension was palpable. A tight rope stretched across the ballroom. AOC leaned into the microphone, her gaze locked on Gabbard. "Senator, if you have ideas, there's a process. Sign up. Get on the list like everyone else. This isn't a free-for-all." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs, and the crowd responded with louder applause, especially from a group of teachers waving signs that read, "OC for Equity." But the mood was fracturing. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt stood up, calling out, Let her speak! His voice was drowned out by a woman near the stage who shouted, "No stick to the program." The room was teetering on the edge of chaos, and AOC, sensing the need to regain control, signaled to the security team stationed at the room's edges. Two guards in crisp black suits moved swiftly toward Gabbard, their earpieces glinting under the lights. The crowd buzzed phones still raised, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Gabbard, standing calmly in the aisle, seemed almost serene in the face of the approaching guards, her face reflecting a quiet confidence, as if she'd faced far greater challenges with the same poise. She raised both hands, not in surrender, but as if asking the world to pause and reflect. "Now, hold on, folks," she said, her voice warm and steady, like she was addressing a community gathering. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I just want 1 minute to say something about the kids we're all here for." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that silenced the room. For a moment, a few audience members clapped, and a guy in a baseball cap near the back yelled, "Give her a chance!" But others weren't convinced. A young activist in a denim jacket stood up, her voice sharp. "This is AOC's event. Get her out!" The divide was clear, and the guards hesitated, their eyes flicking between AOC and Gabbard, waiting for a final directive. AOC, still at the podium, felt the pressure mounting. She was no stranger to handling disruptions. Her years in politics and activism had taught her how to navigate tough crowds. But Gabbard's composed boldness was a different kind of challenge. Her approachable demeanor, that genuine call for inclusion, was disarming, and she could sense part of the audience leaning toward her. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. Refusing her outright might make her seem unwilling to engage, a perception she couldn't afford. After a moment's pause, she nodded, her expression icy but resolute. "Fine, former Representative Gabbard," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. 1 minute. Make it count. And don't waste our time." She stepped back slightly, signaling the guards to stand down. The security team froze their hands, hovering near their radios, and the crowd let out a collective exhale. Phones still recording, waiting for what would come next. Gabbard nodded in thanks, her smile softening as she took another step forward, the stage lights catching her composed features and casting a faint glow around her. She stood in the aisle, not on the stage, but the room's attention was hers. "Thank you, Representative," she said, her voice sincere, almost humble. "I won't overstay my welcome." The crowd grew quiet, a hush falling over the ballroom as all eyes fixed on her. Even AOC's supporters, though wary, leaned forward, curious despite themselves. The cameras adjusted their focus, and a local news reporter in the corner whispered to a colleague, "This is going viral. Mark my words." Gabbard cleared her throat, her hands now relaxed at her sides, and began to speak, her voice rising and falling with the cadence of someone deeply committed to unity. "I've seen firsthand how education can bridge divides," she said, "where the school is the heart of everything. We didn't have much, but we had teachers who cared, neighbors who looked out for each other. I'm here because I believe every kid deserves that chance, no matter where they're from." Her words were straightforward, but they struck a chord. An older woman in a floral dress nodded, her hands clasped in her lap, while a college student in the back whispered to his friend, "She's making sense." Gabbard continued, her tone growing more earnest. "We're all here for the same reason, to make schools better, but we won't get there by shutting each other out. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I'm asking for a seat at the table, just like you." She glanced at AOC, then back at the crowd, her eyes sweeping the room as if inviting everyone to join her in this shared vision. The applause started slowly, a few claps from the center of the room, then spread, growing louder as more joined in. Not everyone was convinced. A group near the stage sat with arms crossed, their loyalty to AOC unshaken, But Gabbard had shifted the atmosphere. Even the skeptics couldn't deny her authenticity. AOC, watching from the podium, felt the stage slipping from her grasp. She kept her face composed, but her mind was racing. Gabbard's minute wasn't just a speech. It was a performance calculated to foster understanding. She knew she had to reclaim the room, but the crowd's reaction told her it wouldn't be easy. A young teacher in the front row stood up, clapping for Gabbard, then caught herself glancing at AOC with a sheepish look. The applause grew, and a man in a suit near the aisle called out, "That's right, let's talk." But another voice closer to the stage countered, "No, AOC, keep going." The room was a mosaic of opinions, and Gabbard, still standing in the aisle, seemed to embody a bridge, her smile subtle but unmistakable. The guards, now relegated to the background, exchanged glances, unsure whether their role was over. A reporter from a local station typed furiously on her phone, sensing a headline, "Gabbard steals spotlight at AOC's Education Summit." AOC stepped back to the microphone, her voice calm but sharp. "Thank you, former Representative Gabbard, for your input," she said, choosing her words carefully, "but we're here to talk about real solutions, funding, access, equity, not just words." Her supporters clapped, their energy returning, but it was clear Gabbard's brief moment had left a mark. The crowd was still buzzing, some chanting AOC, while others murmured Gabbard's name. The ballroom, once united in purpose, now felt like a battleground of ideas, with Gabbard's unexpected arrival as the spark. She stood there, her presence a quiet invitation to dialogue. The stage was set for a clash, not just of policies, but of perspectives, and the audience, both in the room and watching through countless phone screens, knew they were witnessing something unforgettable. As the initial wave of surprise settled, the air remained charged with whispers rippling through the rows like a gentle current. Some attendees pulling out notebooks to jot down thoughts, others sharing quick glances with neighbors, debating in hushed tones whether this interruption was a disruption or an opportunity. Gabbard's composure stood out, a beacon of calm amid the stir, her eyes reflecting a deep-seated belief in the power of inclusive conversation, and as the seconds ticked by, more people found themselves nodding along, recalling times when listening had bridged gaps in their own lives. The chandeliers above seemed to cast a warmer light on the scene, highlighting the diversity of the crowd, from seasoned educators with years of classroom experience to young activists fresh from campus protests, all now part of this evolving narrative. AOC, ever the strategist, adjusted her stance at the podium, her mind already formulating how to weave this moment back into her broader message of urgent reform. But the energy had undeniably shifted, with Gabbard's words lingering like an echo that refused to fade. In the press pit, journalists exchanged excited murmurs, fingers flying over keyboards to capture the raw authenticity of the exchange, knowing that in today's fast-paced media landscape, moments like this could define public discourse for weeks. Meanwhile, a cluster of students near the back began discussing among themselves, one saying, "I didn't expect that, but she's got a point about unity," while another countered, "But AOC is the one pushing for change," the debate mirroring the larger tension in the room. Gabbard, sensing the room's pulse, didn't push further, immediately allowing her message to settle, her posture relaxed, yet engaging, as if she were simply one more voice in a collective effort toward better education. The security guards, now standing idle, shifted uncomfortably, their initial purpose overshadowed by the organic flow of the event. From the side, a volunteer organizer whispered to a colleague, "This could go either way." But it's definitely not boring, underscoring how Gabbard's intervention had injected a fresh layer of dynamism into what might have been a standard summit. As the applause finally died down, AOC cleared her throat, ready to steer the conversation forward, but the imprint of Gabbard's presence was indelible, a testament to how one composed voice could spark reflection in a crowded space. The ballroom's walls, adorned with elegant drapes, seemed to absorb the heightened emotions, while outside the hum of the city continued oblivious. But inside, this was a microcosm of broader societal conversations about how to approach reform with confrontation or collaboration. Gabbard's approach, rooted in respect and openness, had already won quiet admirers, even among those who aligned more closely with AOC's fiery advocacy, creating a subtle undercurrent of possibility that the summit might evolve beyond its planned agenda. In that moment, the event transcended its origins, becoming a living example of democracy in action, where unexpected voices could emerge and challenge the status quo without descending into chaos. The air thickened with anticipation for what might come next, phones buzzing with incoming notifications as early clips began circulating online, hinting at the viral potential of Gabbard's poised stand. AOC's supporters rallied with renewed vigor, their signs held high, but the overall vibe was one of intrigued division, a fertile ground for deeper discussions on equity and education. Gabbard, with her unyielding calm, had set the stage for a dialogue that promised to resonate far beyond the ballroom's confines, her one-minute plea serving as a catalyst for thought-provoking exchange. As the summit paused in this pivotal juncture, the collective breath of the audience held, waiting to see how the narrative would unfold from here. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis was still crackling with energy, the echoes of Tulsi Gabbard's unexpected minute-long speech lingering like the afterglow of a firework. Her call for unity and dialogue resonating deeply with parts of the crowd. The audience, a patchwork of teachers, students, activists, and local reporters, buzzed with a mix of excitement and division, some still clapping their hands warm from applauding Gabbard's sincere plea for a seat at the table, while others sat with arms crossed, their loyalty to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez unwavering. AOC stood at the podium, her navy blazer catching the stage lights, her expression a careful mask of composure. She'd just allowed Gabbard her minute, a decision she knew carried risks, and now the room felt different, less hers, more a shared space, where Gabbard's presence loomed large. The cameras from MSNBC to local news stations panned between her and Gabbard, who stood calmly in the aisle, her poised demeanor and warm smile making her look like she'd just stepped into a community forum ready to build bridges. The air was thick with anticipation, and everyone, audience reporters, even the security guards hovering at the edges, knew the next moments would shape the summit's narrative. Gabbard, sensing the crowd's pulse, didn't rush to speak again. She let the applause fade, her hands in a relaxed posture, her stance deliberate and inviting. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she spoke, her voice carrying that same steady cadence that had already won over part of the room. "Representative, I'm grateful for that minute," she said, nodding toward AOC with a sincerity that felt almost disarming. "And I don't plan to overstay my welcome, but let me share a quick insight." The crowd leaned in, some out of curiosity, others with skepticism. A young man in a hoodie near the back whispered to his friend, "This lady's got presence." Gabbard continued, her tone warm, like she was sharing wisdom over a shared meal. "I've witnessed how true change in education comes from bringing people together, regardless of differences, where one dedicated teacher can inspire a whole community." She'd say, "You don't learn by talking over each other. You learn by listening and collaborating." That stuck with me. She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, locking with a teacher in the front row, then a student in the back. "We're here to fix schools, right? Well, I think we'd all agree. That starts by giving each other a chance to be heard and finding common ground." The words were simple, but they landed like a well-aimed bridge. Applause broke out louder this time, spreading from the center of the room to the edges. A middle-aged woman in a cardigan stood up, clapping with a smile. her eyes bright with agreement. A group of college students originally there to support AOC exchanged glances, one muttering, "She's kind of making sense." Even some of AOC's supporters, though hesitant, couldn't help but nod at the sentiment. Gabbard's insight wasn't just words, it was a connector linking her vision of unity to the diverse crowd, making the idea of listening feel universal and essential. The cameras caught every moment, zooming in on her composed face, her thoughtful eyes, and the crowd's shifting mood. A local reporter typed rapidly on her laptop, her screen flashing with a draft headline, "Gabbard wins hearts at Education Summit." AOC, still at the podium, felt the room tilting toward Gabbard. Her hands rested lightly on the podium's edge, but her mind was racing. She'd seen engaging speakers before, but Gabbard's ability to turn a near ejection into a moment of genuine connection was something else. Her approachable demeanor, that call for collaboration, was drawing people in, and she could sense the audience warming to it. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the fading applause. "Former Representative Gabbard, stories are nice," she said, her tone measured but sharp. "But the kids in underfunded schools need more than anecdotes. They need funding, resources, real change. Not just a seat at the table, but a system that works for them." Her words sparked a wave of applause, especially from her core supporters near the stage who waved signs reading, "Equity." Now a young teacher in glasses stood up shouting, "That's right, AOC." The room was splitting again, one side drawn to Gabbard's warmth, the other rallying behind AOC's call for action. The security guards, still lingering near the aisle, exchanged glances, unsure if they'd need to step in again. Gabbard, unfazed, tilted her head, as if weighing AOC's words. Then she smiled softly, a gesture that carried through the room and drew a few appreciative nods from the crowd. "Representative, you're right, kids. Need more than stories," she said, her voice steady but inviting. "But let me tell you, I've seen folks across this country, teachers working 2 jobs, parents scraping by, who want to know someone's listening. They don't care about who's got the loudest mic. They want a conversation." She spread her hands as if inviting the entire room to join her. "I'm not here to oppose you, Representative. I'm here to say, let's talk. Really talk about what our schools need and build solutions together." The crowd erupted again, the applause louder than before now, including some who'd been on the fence. A man in a denim jacket near the back stood up, his voice booming. "She's got a point. Let's talk." A woman in a business suit nodded, whispering to her colleague, "I didn't expect to agree with her." The shift was undeniable. Gabbard's authenticity was like a tide pulling even the skeptical toward her. Her messages, rooted in a commitment to unity, resonated in a room filled with urban educators and activists. A group of high school students in the corner holding signs for AOC began whispering among themselves, one saying, "She's not wrong about listening." The cameras captured it all, the crowd's reactions, Gabbard's confident poise, and AOC's controlled intensity. A reporter from a local news station texted her editor, "Gabbard's stealing the show." Meanwhile, phones across the room were already uploading clips of her speech to social media. A 30-second video posted by an account called NYC Truth Teller showed Gabbard's unity story with the caption, "Tulsi Gabbard just dropped a truth bomb at AOC's summit." Within minutes, the clip had thousands of views, comments flooding in. "This lady's real AOC got challenged, but Gabbard's got me thinking." AOC, sensing the crowd's drift, stepped forward again, her voice rising with resolve. "Former Representative, I hear you on listening," she said, her eyes locked on her. "But let's be clear, the system isn't broken because people aren't talking. It's broken because resources aren't reaching the kids who need them most. Black, brown, low-income communities left behind for decades." Her words were like a rallying cry, reigniting her supporters. A group near the stage stood up, clapping fiercely, one shouting, "Tell it, AOC!" The applause was strong, but it couldn't quite drown out the murmurs of Gabbard's name from the back. AOC continued her tone, unwavering. "We're not here to swap insights. We're here to demand accountability, to push for policies that close the gap. That's what these kids deserve." Her supporters roared, and for a moment, she reclaimed the room's energy, her passion cutting through Gabbard's warmth like a focused beam. But Gabbard wasn't done. She took a small step forward, still keeping her distance from the stage, her smile subtle but confident. "Representative, I don't disagree," she said, her voice low but clear, picked up by a nearby microphone. "Those kids deserve everything we can give them. But I've learned something from engaging with communities. Change starts when we stop shouting and start sharing ideas. I'm not your opponent here, I'm just asking for a chance to work together toward real progress." The crowd responded with another wave of applause, this time from a broader swath of the audience, including some who'd clapped for AOC moments before. A retired principal in the third row stood up, her voice carrying, "She's right. Let's find common ground." The room was a cacophony of cheers and counter-cheers, with chants of AOC mixing with calls of Gabbard. The security guards, now little more than spectators, stood back, their role overshadowed by the unfolding drama. The social media frenzy was growing by the second. The NYC Truth Teller clip had now hit 20,000 views, with comments ranging from Gabbard's a legend to AOC's still the queen. Another video, posted by a student in the audience, showed Gabbard's "Let's Talk" line with text overlay, "When you crash a summit and win the crowd." The hashtag Gabbard Ada Oaks Summit began trending, and news outlets were already drafting stories. A local reporter whispered to a colleague, "This is bigger than the summit itself." Back in the ballroom, Gabbard stood in the aisle, her presence commanding. Despite her understated demeanor, she didn't need the stage. Her words, her insights, her charm had made the aisle her platform. AOC, though, was far from defeated. She gripped the podium, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for a way to pull the focus back to her mission. She knew Gabbard's warmth was a challenge, but she also knew her own strength, her ability to speak truth to power, to rally those who believed in her vision. As the applause for Gabbard began to fade, AOC leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but charged with purpose. "Former Representative, I appreciate your call for conversation," she said, her words deliberate. "But let's not confuse talking with doing. The kids in this city and this country need us to act now." Her supporters erupted their applause, a reminder of her hold on the room, even in the face of Gabbard's compelling rise. The crowd was split, a living reflection of a divided nation, and the summit, meant to be a focused discussion on education, had become something else entirely, a stage for two contrasting visions of leadership. Gabbard, with her disarming authenticity, had turned a near ejection into a moment of profound connection. But AOC, with her unrelenting focus, was determined to keep the fight for equity front and center. The ballroom, alive with tension and possibility, waited for what would come next. As Gabbard's message of unity continued to echo, inspiring whispers of agreement and sparking a broader dialogue that extended far beyond the initial minute granted to her. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis thrummed with restless energy. The clash between Tulsi Gabbard's heartfelt call for unity and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's fiery push for systemic change, leaving the audience in a state of electrified division. The chandeliers cast a soft glow over the crowd, but the atmosphere was anything but calm, with applause for Gabbard's words mingling with fervent cheers for AOC's demand for action. The room was a mosaic of reactions, teachers nodding thoughtfully, students whispering heatedly, and reporters typing furiously, their screens aglow with draft headlines. AOC stood at the podium, her navy blazer sharp under the stage lights, her eyes scanning the crowd as she worked to steer the Education Reform Summit back to its core mission. Gabbard, still in the aisle, her poised demeanor and warm smile unshaken, had become an undeniable force, her brief speech turning a near ejection into a viral moment. The security guards, now relegated to the sidelines, stood with arms crossed, their role diminished by the crowd's focus on the two figures commanding the room. Outside the ballroom, clips of Gabbard's words were spreading like wildfire across social media, and the summit meant to address school inequities was morphing into a stage for a broader cultural showdown. AOC, sensing the need to reclaim control, leaned into the microphone. Her voice steady but charged. "We're here for the kids," she said, her words slicing through the lingering buzz, not for debates, not for stories, but for solutions, real policies to fund schools, hire teachers, and close the gaps that leave our most vulnerable behind. Her supporters erupted their applause, drowning out the murmurs, and for a moment she held the room again. A teacher in the front row, her lanyard swinging, stood up, shouting, "That's why we're here." AOC continued, her tone resolute. "We need to triple funding for Title I, schools expand access to early education, and ensure every child has a qualified teacher who looks like them and understands their world." Her vision was concrete, her passion palpable, and the crowd responded with a renewed surge of energy, especially from activists near the stage waving signs reading, "Equity Now." But the moment was fleeting. Phones across the ballroom glowed with notifications as Gabbard's clip, posted by NYC Truth Teller, surged past 50,000 views. Comments poured in. Gabbard's, "Got my vote for unity, AOC's fighting for us, but she's got a point. And this is real leadership." Another video, uploaded by a student, showed Gabbard's "Let's Talk" line with the caption, "When you crash a summit and steal the show." The hashtag #GabbardAOC Summit was trending, and news outlets scrambled to keep up, a local reporter whispering to a colleague, "This is going national." Gabbard stood quietly in the aisle. Her hands relaxed, her smile subtle but knowing. She didn't need to speak again immediately. Her words were already echoing beyond the ballroom, amplified by the digital age. A man in a suit near the aisle leaned toward his friend, saying she turned this around like it was nothing. The crowd's energy was splitting, some drawn to AOC's urgency, others captivated by Gabbard's calm. Backstage, in a small office cluttered with laptops and coffee cups, AOC's team grappled with the fallout. Her aide Maria scrolled through social media on her phone, her face tight with worry. "They're calling Gabbard a unifier," she said, her voice low. "We need to post something, get the narrative back." AOC, standing by a window overlooking the neon glow of Times Square, shook her head. "I'm not chasing likes," she said, her tone firm, but tired. "I came here to talk about kids who can't afford textbooks, not to play social media games." Maria nodded, but her eyes stayed glued to the screen, where a new post read, "Gabbard just showed AOC what dialogue looks like." Another aide, Jamal, chimed in, "We could do an interview, set the record straight." AOC's gaze sharpened. "The record is straight. Those kids need us to act, not posture. Schedule a community meeting for next week." That's where the work happens. Her resolve was unshaken, but the weight of the moment was clear. She knew Gabbard's charm had shifted the spotlight, and while she wouldn't chase it, she felt the sting of losing the room's focus. Meanwhile, Gabbard was making her way toward the ballroom's exit, her aide Sam at her side. A small group of audience members followed, some shaking her hand, others snapping photos. A woman in a green coat, a teacher from Brooklyn, approached former representative. "I don't always agree with you, but you're right about listening," she said, her voice earnest. Gabbard smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Thank you, ma'am. If we start there, we might surprise ourselves." Sam, holding a phone, grinned as he read aloud a comment from the viral clip. Gabbard's, like the friend who calms everyone down. Gabbard chuckled, shaking her head. I just said what I believed she said, her voice as calm as ever. But Sam wasn't buying the modesty. You flipped the whole room, this is blowing up. As they reached the lobby, a reporter from a local station, microphone in hand, intercepted them. Former Representative Gabbard, your speech is everywhere, online. What's your take on the reaction? Gabbard paused, her smile softening. Folks want to feel heard if they liked what I said. I'm glad if not, I'll keep talking. Her words, simple and unpretentious, were already being quoted across news sites, cementing her image as a bridge builder in a polarized age. The crowd's divide was palpable. A group of activists near the stage chanting, AOC, AOC, their voices a defiant reminder of her mission while in the back. A cluster of audience members, swayed by Gabbard's warmth, murmured her name, some clapping as she nodded graciously to a supporter. A middle-aged man in a flannel shirt stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. Let's hear both sides, he called, drawing a mix of cheers and boos. A young woman in a beanie near him shook her head, muttering, This is her event. The tension was a living thing coiling tighter with every shout, but Gabbard's presence remained a steady anchor, her call for collaboration resonating as a quiet counterpoint to the room's fervor. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis was nearly empty, the chandeliers casting long, soft shadows over scattered chairs. As the Education Reform Summit drew to a close, its original mission to tackle school inequities now transformed into a powerful clash of ideals between Tulsi Gabbard's unifying warmth and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's unyielding call for systemic change. The remaining attendees, educators, students, and activists filed out slowly, their voices a low hum of impassioned debate, some still clutching signs reading, Equity, now, others scrolling through phones, buzzing with social media updates. AOC stood at the podium, concluding her speech with a resolute nod, her navy blazer slightly creased from the event's intensity. We keep fighting for every child, every classroom, every community. She declared, her voice steady and charged, sparking a final fervent wave of applause from her supporters. In the lobby, Gabbard was surrounded by a small cluster of admirers, her poised demeanor and warm smile as captivating as ever, her brief intervention having left an indelible mark. The summit's impact was already spilling beyond the ballroom, rippling through news feeds, coffee shop conversations, and the minds of those who'd witnessed it, carrying a profound lesson about the power of dialogue and purpose in a polarized world. In the lobby, Gabbard shook hands with a retiring principal in a worn corduroy jacket, his eyes bright with admiration. You got folks thinking about unity, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. We need more of that. Gabbard nodded, her eyes crinkling with warmth. If we just talk to each other, we'll find a way forward, she replied, her tone as natural as a conversation among friends. A college student with a backpack slung over one shoulder approached, phone in hand. Her voice excited. Your speech is all over my feed. People are saying, you changed the game. Gabbard chuckled softly, her hands relaxed. I just spoke from the heart. If it resonates, that's up to the folks out there. Her aide Sam stood nearby, fielding calls from news outlets, eager for a sound bite. A reporter from a local station, microphone extended, caught Gabbard before she could leave. Former Representative, your moment at the summit's gone viral. What do you hope people take from it? Gabbard paused, her smile softening. I hope they see we can disagree without shutting each other out. That's how we start fixing things. Her words, simple yet profound, were quoted across news sites within the hour, solidifying her image as a bridge builder in a divided era. A small group of supporters lingered, one snapping a photo, another asking for a quick word. Their enthusiasm a testament to Gabbard's ability to connect authentically. Backstage, AOC sat in a small office, the neon glow of Times Square filtering through the window, casting a faint light across her face. Her team buzzed around her laptops, open phones pinging with notifications. Her aide, Maria, scrolled through a flood of social media posts, her brow furrowed with frustration. They're calling Gabbard the voice of reason. A peacemaker, she said, her voice low. We need to push back. Maybe a video. Recapping your speech. AOC. Her hands clasped, shook her head firmly. The work isn't on those screens, she said, her tone calm but resolute. It's in the schools, the communities, the kids who don't have a voice. Another aide, Jamal, nodded, jotting down notes. I'll set up a town hall in the Bronx next week. We'll keep the momentum going. AOC's focus remained unshaken, her commitment to her mission unwavering despite the narrative shift caused by Gabbard's viral moment. She knew the headlines were dominated by Gabbard's call for unity, but her work wasn't about chasing fleeting applause, it was about tangible change. A text from her sister lit up her phone. You were incredible, but Gabbard's getting all the buzz, keep pushing. AOC smiled faintly, setting the phone down. I'm not here for the buzz, she told Maria. I'm here for the kids who need us. At the summit and beyond, Gabbard's heartfelt call to listen and AOC's urgent push for action sparked debate both in cafes and online, where hashtags like #Gabbard, #AOC Summit, and #AOC for Equity trended. A TikTok mashup of their messages went viral. Headlines framed it as warmth versus urgency, and analysts saw two distinct leadership styles. The lesson was clear: sincerity can unite, conviction can drive change, and together they model progress. The legacy wasn't about who won, but about balance, listening without losing values, blending dialogue with action, and applying it in everyday life from classrooms to communities to shape a more hopeful future.